Hello, my name is Alice Boyd. I'm a musician, sound artist and audio producer, and my work is inspired by the natural world and our place within it. I've been sent some questions by Fikri to answer for this video, and they're about my new EP called Cloud Walking, which I released towards the end of last year. So here we go. First of all, when did I decide to write Cloud Walking? How does this EP represent the evolution of my sound and my narrative since my earlier releases, and how did I compose the songs? So I decided to make the Cloud Walking EP after going on a mini expedition to the Cairngorm mountain range in Scotland, and I went with a group of 8 other women as part of something called the Following Nan Project. And this project was inspired by a nature writer called Nan Shepherd, who wrote this book in the 1940s called The Living Mountain, which was all about her experience in the Cairngorms, the little details she noticed along the way during her time in the mountains, and just her reflections on the mountains and the landscape in general. And we went on this walk to visit some of the locations that she writes about in this book. And I was really inspired by Nan Shepherd, by the other women on this trip, and the landscape itself, and I wanted to make some music about it. Also, there were 2 filmmakers on this trip called Michelle Sanders and Emily Baker, and together they've made a 15-minute documentary about our experience in the mountains, and they needed some music for this documentary. And so I had these 2 things in my mind. I knew I wanted to make an EP, and I also knew that I wanted to make some music that they could use to underscore the film. So how did I compose the songs? So I started off with my guitar, and I wrote the lyrics and I wrote the songs, and I knew I wanted to have instrumentation on it. And so I started renting a studio, and I brought in different friends and my Aunt Amy to come in with their instruments and to play them over the songs. So this differs quite a lot from my previous EP called From the Understory, which was inspired by an artist residency I did at the Eden Project, which is in Cornwall, and it's the largest indoor rainforest. That EP was much more focused on the interconnectedness between humans, technology, and plant life. So with that, I used a lot more electronics, and I worked with a group of singers to perform the music. For Cloud Walking, it was much more about taking the songs I'd written and bringing a real acoustic feel to it. So I had a number of different people playing instruments on it, from my friend Rachel Kitchlew on the harp to Jake Card on pedal steel, Tom Penn on strings, I had Jacob Norris on the guitar, Katrin Vincent on piano, and then Jacob and my friend Daisy Russell on backing vocals. And I can't remember if I've missed anyone, but basically I just really wanted a very acoustic feel, something that felt quite intimate, warm, a lot warmer than the first EP, just in like the sounds. And then I worked with my friend Liam Evans, who did the mixing of the EP he just made the sounds even richer and more kind of intimate and warm. So yeah, I'd say that's how it sort of evolved a little bit from my previous release. And I'm definitely not opposed to bringing electronics back into my music. I think just for this EP, it just made sense to have it be like a warm hug in a way. So, second question, could I elaborate on the thematic elements explored in Cloud Walking and how they differ or relate to your previous work? So, as with my first EP, Cloud Walking is also quite concept driven, and I think very tied into the landscape of the Cairngorms. So with this EP, I recorded field recordings along the way in the Cairngorms and weaved this into my work. So the sound of the rivers, the birds, the mountain, kind of just the atmos and the wind. And so that felt like a real part of the DNA of the EP, was the natural sounds that you can hear in the cairngorms. Thematically as well, I think this EP was very much about the journey, the highs and the lows through the mountains, the existential questions I had along the way, and also just moments of joy, moments of melancholy. So I think this EP, more than the last one, really taps into the emotions I was feeling along the way. Next question, can I paint a picture of walking into the Scottish Cairngorm Mountains? So I'd never been to the Cairngorms before the expedition, which was in September of 2023, and it was just beautiful walking into that landscape. And we started off walking through a forest, but as the trees sort of went into the distance, we were in this sort of almost alien landscape of just the heather and the low lying scrub along the floor. So yeah, it felt not barren, but quite like windswept, and there was a lot of moss and lichen, and it felt more like an extreme environment. And we really experienced that through the weather and through how changeable it was. So one minute it could be sunny, and then the next it was freezing cold hail, and that really humbled me. I think I can romanticize the natural world quite a lot, and this reminded me of like, no, this can be a dangerous environment, and we have to take it seriously. I'm just gonna have a drink of water. So, next question. Can I share some standout moments or experiences from the expedition and how it influenced my EP? I think one major standout experience was there was one day which was particularly hard, where we were ascending the mountain, and as we were going up, it was getting rainier and rainier, and it was really cold, and the visibility was dropping, so it was very misty and foggy. And by the time we got to the top, we were freezing, and we were camping really near the top of the mountain. So I think it suddenly dawned on us that, okay, this is serious. We need to get these tents up. Thankfully, the people leading the expedition, Hannah, Jen and Ruth, they were amazing, and they got our tents up for us while we were huddled under a storm shelter, just because it got so cold by that point that I couldn't feel my fingers. And we got into our tents. Some of us had the sleeping bags had gotten wet from the rain. It was verging on dangerous. And I think a lot of us were ready to give up the next day and just hope we would get through the night okay and no one's tents would blow in or anything. So I think a lot of us were like, okay, next day we're going to a hostel, we're not camping anymore. But we woke up and the sun started to peep through the clouds, and before we knew it, all the clouds had disappeared and we were suddenly greeted by this really warm sun. And we lay out our tents and our wet clothes on the heather, and it all dried really quickly. And we were so optimistic and hopeful. We'd gone from feeling horrible and so ready to give up, and then suddenly there was this sun. And that inspired my song, Oh the Sun, which was about as we were walking down the mountain, just that joyous feeling. And I think that feeling sort of went into the overall message of the EP, which comes out in my song Heart 2, which features Jacob Norris. And yeah, I think the message was, things can be bad, things can be hard, things can be painful, things can be uncomfortable. Sometimes life can be incredibly difficult, but there's also beauty in it. And my feeling of both the expedition and what I wanted to get across through the songs is this recognition of both the pain and the beauty of life, and how it's just worth keeping on living each day just to see what happens next. So yeah, I think that was a standout moment, and that was sort of the message that came out of it in the end. So next question, how do I translate these themes into my live performance, and what impact do you hope it has on your audience? So with my live performances, I perform with my friends Jacob Norris and Daisy Russell, who both have their own music, which is beautiful. And we do a lot of 3-part harmony. And for me, I feel like this sort of relates to some of the thoughts I'm thinking about mortality, also about togetherness and community. And I find that when three voices are joined together in harmony, just the beauty that comes out of that is so, yeah, I sometimes think there's nothing better than a good harmony. And so I hope audiences also feel that and feel sometimes the emotion or the warmth or whatever it might be from those harmonies. I also weave my field recordings through my music as well, so I think there's just those textures and the sounds of the landscapes through the live performance. So I hope that also takes audiences to those places and they can experience a slice of the Cairngorms or whatever landscape I'm talking about at that particular point in my live set. So the next question is about the visuals of cloud walking. So I have this amazing artwork which was made by Morven Graham, who is a printmaker and storyteller she lives in Scotland, nearish to Edinburgh. And the question's about the correlation behind that artwork and the EP, and also just the importance of visual storytelling to my artistic expression. So I always love working with visual artists. So I've worked with a number for either music videos or for artwork. And this time for this EP, it was important to me to work with someone who does live in Scotland. And Morven is Scottish Scandinavian and just makes these beautiful artworks. And I knew she would understand the storytelling of the EP and translate this into an artwork that made sense. So she created this character that on the front cover of the EP is almost larger than life, and it's striding through the mountains at cloud level, so it's higher than the clouds, which makes sense with the EP title, Cloud Walking, which for me was all about both literally our experience of walking through the misty clouds on this mountain, but also the sort of sifting through our thoughts and, yeah, I guess the more like emotional side of walking through the mist and trying to unearth, I guess, how we're feeling. And Morven took this experience that I had at the Cairngorms, and just everything about what she did tied into that. So even through to the colours she chose for the artwork. So you have the blues of the rivers, the greens of the moss on the rock, the purpley brown of the heather. And she made this character, she made an illustration, a print for each of the different songs, so, and a little animation. So for the lyric videos and the little Spotify cover art, there's this character just experiencing different elements of the mountain. So the next question is, what other trailblazing mountaineers inspire and influence you? That's an interesting question because I think this project was very specific to Nan Shepherd, and it's the first time that a mountaineer has really inspired my work. So I'm not sure I have an answer to that necessarily, but I think what was so special about Nan Shepherd is at the time a lot of her peers in the 1900s were talking about conquering mountains and being the fastest to get to the top of a mountain. But she was encouraging people instead to just enjoy being in the mountain, to notice the small details, the big, like, vast expanse of the landscape, and more just be in the landscape rather than making it a competition or anything about conquering the mountain. So I think she had a really refreshing perspective about mountaineering, or perhaps just she's sometimes called a hill walker. So it's just about being and living in the mountains, which I found very inspiring. Next question is, what other styles of music do I listen to for personal enjoyment? I listen to quite a few different genres. For me, it's less genre specific, but rather than just if a song speaks to me or an artist speaks to me, I'll want to listen to it. But I really love ambient electronic music. I love folk music and, artists like Nick Drake or Joni Mitchell or, all the classics, through to more modern folk sort of indie sounds like Lucinda Chua, or Jessica Pratt. And an artist/band that I reference a lot is Dirty Projectors. I love Dave Longstress, who is sort of the mastermind behind Dirty Projectors. I love how he plays around with genre so much. So sometimes his songs are very folky, sometimes they're more cinematic and orchestral, sometimes they're more electronic or more inspired by sometimes it got like beats in it. Like he plays around so much, and I love that because I think for me, I don't necessarily want to stick in one genre. I want to be able to produce the sounds that feel right for a particular project. Next question: can I describe the most memorable moment of my musical career so far? So there are a few, and I feel very lucky to have been able to perform in some of the places I have over the last couple of years. For me, I think a big moment from last year was being the guest musical act on the Adam Buxton podcast, on one of his live shows, which isn't out yet on the podcast, but it was at the Bristol Beacon in Bristol in the UK. And I'd been listening to the Adam Buxton podcast for about 10 years. So to be on the same stage as him and to be asked to do that was such a pinch me moment. And I think even though sometimes it's difficult being an independent artist and constantly having to push myself and get out there, it's moments like that when I'm in the same room as someone who I admire and has inspired me. Those are the moments that make me realise or feel like I'm doing the right thing and I'm on the right path. So yeah, that was a really good moment. How has my hometown and local music scene influenced my music and performances? So I grew up sort of in the middle of nowhere. So I didn't really have a music scene near me growing up as a kid or a teenager. But over the last number of years I've lived in London, I feel like I've slowly been growing or been finding that community for myself. And so in South London, there are so many people doing great music, and it's been amazing meeting those people, making those friends, and knowing that even if you don't have the community you long for as a teenager, just knowing that one day you will find them. If you're looking for them, you'll find them. And so that's been a really lovely experience. The final question, could I tell you about some of my current projects? Yes, I can. So I currently produce a monthly podcast episode for a podcast called As the Season Turns, and I produce the mid-month episode called Found Sounds. And each month I interview someone who's inspired by the natural world or by folklore or heritage crafts, and I record an interview with them as well as sounds of their practice and their environment, and I weave those sounds through the interview. So that's something I really look forward to because it's interviewing someone I find interesting and visiting different places in the UK. I'm also working on some new music, so I've got a couple of songs that I'm recording and will hopefully release later this year. And I'm also just thinking about my next EP or album, which will, be recorded at some stage. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. But if you would like to stay in touch and hear about my music more, I am on Instagram and social media at Alice Boyd Music. I have a website, www.aliceboyd.info, where I also have a newsletter and a Substack. So if you want to be kept up to date via email, you can do that there. I also am on Spotify, Apple Music, all those places under Alice Boyd. And I also have some vinyl and CDs and some lyric booklets and prints, including Morven's artwork, on my website, www.aliceboyd.info/shop. But thank you so much for having me. Thank you for listening. And I hope you like my music. And yeah, it's been really lovely talking about it today. Hope you have a nice rest of your day, and bye.